The Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It's a fabulous Friday edition. It is Friday, May 16th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son, Joe Hagmann, fellow investigator, of course, my son, co-host. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. Folks, you're about to hear an incredible 3-hour program, 3 hours of news that will rock your world. I guarantee you. Folks, we're at a tipping point right now. We are at a tipping point. There is a freight train coming our way, and we've got a couple of options. We're not going to stop that freight train from coming, but we certainly can get it out of the way, and more and others as well. Before we get into the topical matter, of course, you're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. We look well beyond the headlines, the bylines, the fog of disinformation to bring you the news behind the news. For the new listeners, folks, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. On the Internet, you can find us at our home base, HomelandSecurityUS.com. That's HomelandSecurityUS.com, not to be confused with the tyrannical Homeland Security, but, of course, the real security of our nation. We're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. Spell it all out. 2 N's on Hagmann and spell out the word and. And thanks for joining us. Thank you for your belief and your trust in us tonight as we walk through this minefield of events together. Joe, welcome to tonight's program.
Excuse me. Great to be here. We have a fantastic guest for tonight. And for those of you who might have missed earlier this week, as always, on Tuesday, we had Stan Deo in the second hour. Wednesday, we were joined by Doc Marquis. Yesterday, we had Paul McGuire. It was a terrific set of shows, one right after another, and tonight is going to be just as good as our guest,
Mr. Greg Morse. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt there. Folks, if you're by a computer right now, if you're listening to this live and you're by a computer, I'd like you to do something. I'd like you to log on to SaveOurFamilyAndHome.com. That's SaveOurFamilyAndHome.com. Alternatively, you can go to HomelandSecurityUS.com on the right-hand side under tonight's show. You can simply click the link to that website. Our guest name is Greg Morse. Now, he was a guest on Caravan to Midnight with John B. Wells recently, episode number 57. It's a fantastic program. People are still talking about that. Mr. Morse has got a stellar military career, and I want to thank him for his service. He was an F-4 Phantom pilot in the Air Force and Navy, lieutenant commander in the Navy. Just a stellar military career. He is a publicly and legally filed whistleblower. Okay, now I'm gonna let him give more of an introduction of himself. But the topic tonight is, well, it's very simple. The American dream, of course, of home ownership, of having your own, having your own house, owning your own home, being of course, having the nuclear family with the dog and the children and the white picket fence and the yard, and of course, it's being sold. The American dream has been sold to us forever. Something, folks, something happened. Something happened, and that American dream became the American nightmare. And things are happening, have happened, and will continue to happen behind the scenes. Mr. Morse is on with us to tell you, to give you some history, to give you some current events, and also to provide the solutions as to what he's doing. But the reason I asked you to log on to SaveOurFamilyAndHome.com. If you can't do it right now, please remember to do that. The reason I asked you to do that is on this website, on his website, he has got links, documents for download. In fact, 12 different areas, plus more, but 12 on the front page that they're worth really millions, if not more, millions of dollars. The information is incredible. This gentleman has done his homework, and the topic again tonight is Well, the shattering of the American dream, where you stand in your mortgage. If you've got a mortgage, if your parents have a mortgage, a house, it doesn't matter, your children, your neighbor, you need to listen to what Mr. Morse has got to say. I spoke with him off air for a couple of hours yesterday. To hear what this gentleman has got to say will rock the foundations of your belief system. Now, with that, I'd like to bring on and welcome, of course, Mr. Greg Morse. Greg, welcome to the Hagmann Report.
Thanks, Doug. Joe, I appreciate it.
Greg, we're going to turn you loose. I guess, well, why don't you go ahead and give the audience a little bit about your background to the extent you're comfortable, and an overview of the topic tonight, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay. I guess it starts back in the mid-'80s. I'll make it real short, but it starts back in the mid-'80s. I was one of a group of people in a small company that ended up being the largest developer of privately funded airports in the country for a period of time. And through that involvement with that airport development in North Texas, we became aware of the S&L fraud process, which is very similar, only many orders of magnitude smaller than is the residential mortgage crisis. And through that, I fought that for 9 years and ended up winning. And through that process, a couple other folks were involved on the front end of disclosing and uncovering and making the S&L crisis aware. It spread to Lincoln Savings, and then it went from Texas to other places. And of course, there were similar efforts taking place around the country, but we were kind of on the front end, at least in the Texas area, to tell the world what was going on. So that's my background in terms of investigations. That kind of was rooted in some of my military history. But once I learned about the S&L debacle, we went very deeply down the rabbit hole to try to figure out not just the myopic view of what was going on, but what was the macro view, very deeply down the rabbit hole, so that we could attempt to determine why it happened, who was behind it, what were the plural motivations for it. And then we come forward to this current situation, and what we find is that the similarities, Doug and Joe, between the S&L crisis of almost 30 years ago with the mortgage crisis today is breathtakingly and stunningly similar. So I can't prove it evidentially, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it appears to me that if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, but you can't actually see the duck, so you can't go on the record of saying it is a duck, the overwhelming nature of the circumstantial evidence is that it could very well have been the S&L crisis. It could have been a primer or a beta test for what we're seeing right now.
It's that big. What we're in right now, I suppose, and after talking with you again yesterday off air and just kind of getting into the topic, we as a nation are at a tipping point right now. And everyone today, and I've said this before, Mr. Morse, on our program, everyone today is looking for this one event to take place, this one specific event. They're looking ahead in the future for this. But what people don't understand, I believe what they don't understand is we are in this event, and the event that really has the potential of destroying this nation, ending the world as we know it, not ending the world, of course. I don't want to overstate the case or scare or sound like I'm fear-mongering, but I guess what I'm saying is what you're going to be talking about this evening is the deliberate, orchestrated takeover, and correct me if these terms are incorrect, but takeover or plundering, pillaging of our nation, beginning with involving our personal homes, properties, to the extent that it conforms with a larger agenda that was set in motion long ago. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
All right. Okay. And your reference to the S&L crisis back in the 1980s is what you're saying is that was merely based on your evaluation, your assessment, your research and investigation. That's peanuts compared with what we're seeing right now.
There's no question. It is evidentially true and provable that singular statement is accurate.
Okay.
In terms of saying what is the financial value or size of each of those two crises, that's evidentially known. What I can't say is that my contention that it was potentially a beta test, because we know that geopolitically things don't happen in days, weeks, months, or a few years. They happen slowly and progressively over a number of decades typically. That's done for one specific, and it comes right out of the intelligence manual, which I'm a little familiar with. Things are done very slowly and behind the scenes so as to not give too much fear or shine too much light of truth on what's really going on versus what the average American citizen perceives is going on.
Interesting. All right. Mr. Morse, why don't you take us through, well, I'll just tell you this. The average, in our audience, we've got a variety of people listening to this program, all walks of life, all stations in life. We've got people listening in Europe and in Asia. We've got people listening all over the country here in America. What's going on? I mean, and we've got homeowners, we've got renters, we've got people who own mobile homes on rented lots. I mean, you name it. We have got the cross section of humanity. I'm going to just cut you loose. You tell us what is going on, what you found, the establishment of your website. You know, where do we begin? Just present everything to us. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize. I've given a lot of thought because it's really an honor for me to be invited by you folks to be on your show. And since we're going to be doing this every Friday night for the foreseeable future for the specific beneficial goal of your listening audience, and hopefully every member of your listening audience will tell about the broadcast so that people will put it on their schedule, if possible. If not, at least go back and listen to it after the fact. The purpose of this is to give people evidential knowledge and understanding about what the real situation is versus what they likely think the situation is, for the purpose of mobilizing the homeowner group in this country to be able to implement actionable events which will allow us to do that which you stated in the intro, and that is we can't stop likely what's coming, but we can certainly have a very devastatingly positive effect on affecting who, what, when, where, and why that happens, and we can protect each of ourselves individually and our neighbors, family, friends, church members, business associates from getting out of the way of the point of impact of the problem.
Okay.
So my thought is, if it sits all right with you and Joe, I think it would be of benefit to your listening audience to maybe take just a few minutes to kind of set the stage by explaining the macro view of what's going on for the purpose of trying to bring educationally, through the dissemination of information, everybody in the listening audience up to a point of more common understanding. so that we don't lose anybody. And since we're not in a hurry to get all of this out in 1 3-hour show, which we cannot do, it is a physical impossibility. And that is why I have to just tip my hat to you patriots to say thank you for this venue, this opportunity, because this opportunity is not afforded by any other venue in the lamestream press. That is how they keep everybody in the dark, because that nobody has the opportunity to hear the whole story, see the evidence, evaluate their own mortgage according to the checklist that they'll see. They click on at the top of the website, of my website. That's not a group website. That's me. I wrote every word on it. So good, bad, or indifferent, I'm bellying up saying that's what I feel, that's what I wrote, because I see a solution that we can implement if we come together and we do it quickly, because I've figured out from a business model standpoint how to attack the macro problem by implementing a number of myopic events that each of us can do very cheaply. I'm talking $10 to $30, something infinitesimally small, the price of a couple of 3 movie tickets. In a very small amount of time, we can beat them in numbers where each of us individually cannot. And, of course, I've been at it for 6 years, and my case is in 4 different courts, and I'm now a whistleblower, and we're driving them crazy because they've been doing everything they can to legally dispose of us, and we're kind of like flypaper. So that's really kind of immaterial, but it's being done for a reason, and we can get into that. But I think taking a few minutes to kind of set the macro stage might be helpful to your audience. What do you think?
Yeah, I got to tell you, we've got one of the most intelligent audiences in the listening universe. So let's take a look at the situation from a view from space. Let's take a look at it and then drill down. And because, folks, if you're listening to this broadcast, you're involved in what Mr. Morse is about to explain. You are definitely involved. If you're living, breathing, sucking air right now, you are involved, and you need to hear this. So go ahead, Mr. Morse. Take it from the top.
Okay, let's talk macro view. We are at a tipping point, ladies and gentlemen. I am somewhat fearful that because of the way the major press operates, there are a number of people, a statistically significant number of people in the country that are either thinking that the bogus, falsely intended, totally ineffectual, politically instigated and implemented governmental efforts to solve this problem are actually solving the problem. I hear from people by the thousands on a regular basis, and there are actually some that think the mortgage crisis is over. The reality is the mortgage crisis has not even begun yet. And that reality is now being manifested by the actions that are taking place in the federal bankruptcy court in the Southern District of New York. That is the first beta test implementation of what I term the endgame exit strategy, which I wrote about in October of 2010. The listening audience can click on the link on the website at the top of the page and see the actual article that went viral on the internet. Now, Doug and Joe, don't ask me how. I'm not an electronics guy, so I don't know how you determine what goes viral or what doesn't. But all the people that called me said this thing is viral. I don't know what the heck that means. I just know a lot of people read it. But here's the point. The point is that the facts necessary 4 years ago, this coming October, it will have been 4 years, the facts that were necessary to be able for the average logical thinking person to gather, assemble, assimilate, and then draw conclusions from that information were all on the table 4 years ago. I am not a Gerald Celente, who I think is an amazingly insightful trends forecaster. I'm not that guy. What I did was write in 2010 simply a synopsis going back to the days of the S&L crisis and coming forward with the evidence that was original sourced, not opinionated, actual original source, court-admissible evidence in 2010 that anyone could have drawn the conclusion that what is now going on in the Southern District of New York Bankruptcy Court is exactly what I wrote about, and it's happening on schedule. Now, the reason we're at a tipping point, and I'm going to go through a number of issues for the audience in close order drill succession. This is the largest, most significant threat, financial or otherwise, that we as Americans face, and they've so far, until folks like you and John B. Wells and other great patriots have stepped up and said, yes, we agree that this is the tipping point. This information has got to be put into the open air environment so that everybody can go see the evidence, determine how that evidence affects them so that they can make a risk analysis assessment of how close to the impact point are they. This has been working since 2008, and if you go back to about 2011, maybe early 12 at the latest, real coverage on this issue pretty much dried up. Now, periodically, you'll hear a little snippet here, a little snippet there. But the media transfer of information from legitimate sources to the public has all but dried up on this. If you compare what went on between 2008 and 2011, late in the year, and then come from that point forward to today, this issue is almost not even discussed. That's scary to me. Because when you're not aware of what's going on, but the speed of the train has been uninterruptedly increasing all that time. When the train hits the brick wall at 125 miles an hour instead of 10 miles an hour, it makes a much bigger boom when it goes off. Second, this particular problem is absolutely built on the concept of a RICO fraud enterprise that was pre-engineered by people and institutions who had as their goal not just the quadrillions of dollars that this represents. We'll talk about that. It's that collective action was instigated as the largest Agenda 21 based decimation of property rights, land grab, and taking away of both resources and assets in addition to land. It comes right out of the 1992 Agenda 21 handbook.
It's that big. That's the macro view. Of course, well, the mid-level macro view. On the larger scale, you're talking about global dominance. But but go ahead and continue, sir.
Well, I don't want to just ramble on, so please interrupt me and interject whatever you want to. I want to cover the points, but I don't want it to become too long between segments here. We're not speculating on anything that I'm telling you. We have over 13,000 pages currently of original source public documents related primarily to my specific mortgage, on which I was never late on, never missed a payment, and I am the pro se plaintiff in that case. The banks did not attack me. I attacked them. Why was that? Because if you understand the magnitude of the problem, what was supposed to have happened when you purchased your home versus what likely, if Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems, or any other group of MERS members were involved, which they were in almost 70 million mortgages, your legal attachment to that property has been destroyed. Not hurt, not injured. It's been destroyed. That means that without your knowledge, you work your heart out to make your mortgage payments, pay the property taxes, the maintenance, and the rest of it. But what you're doing when you're doing that under the conditions we now exist in, you are acting as an involuntarily indentured servant. That is against federal law in this country. That is against federal law. The problem is, Doug and Joe, that the powers that be, and now apparently with millions literally of data points, the court system doesn't seem to care too much about that. I'm not inside their heads, so I can't tell you what each individual participant is thinking. But again, we're at that point of look like a duck, walk like a duck. What is it? Is it a duck or a kangaroo? I'm just an old East Texas country boy fighter pilot, so I'm going to come down on the side of saying it's probably a duck. Now, we base all of our analysis on actual evidence, no speculation. And what's come out of that is that what we are facing is a breathtaking, clear, and present danger. Because the massive size of this RICO fraud pre-engineered enterprise is so massive and it's so all-encompassing, and there are so many people at so much financial risk and exposure, that the only way that we as a nation are going to survive this is to, in our own way, attempt to do what happened in Iceland. Now, that is not revolutionary in any way. We have got to stand up for our property rights, because going back to the early 1600s, that was the basis for this nation being formed.
Absolutely.
And if you take away an individual's right to legally, safely, unstressfully, and securely own that property, you have cattle who are then easily manipulatable, because it takes effort, time, sacrifice, jobs, money to be able to afford the purchase, payoff, and acquisition ultimately of that home. So what you're in effect doing from a macro perspective is, if you can get the homeowner to invest all of those factors and more, but at the end of the process, if they don't own that home, you have just raped and stolen from them their lives.
Greg, I'm going to just interject something here. People are listening perhaps, and they're saying, well, 15 years ago, my wife and I, we purchased our home. It's a beautiful single-family home on a piece of property. We entered into a mortgage agreement. I've got the mortgage papers right here. It says in 15, 20, 30 years, whatever it might be, I'm going to own that home free and clear. And we're going to have a mortgage burning party when that happens, and we are, going to live the rest of our days in happy retirement. All life will be good. Life will be great. In fact, life's good right now because, I'm living in my home. I just put an addition on. I've got a beautiful environment in which I live. I'm good with the bank. I'm up to date on my payments. They're not after me. Everything is just hunky-dory. And I just can't wait for the day that my mortgage is paid off. I'm living the American dream. You're telling me all is not as it appears.
Exactly correct.
Okay. How so? And it's not just you like that question. I mean, take us through the process as to what in the world is going on here.
Theoretically, our property rights as individual Americans is supposed to be tied irrevocably to the open, honest, legal, and publicly filed as stipulated by statutory requirement. A specific set of processes which ensure, under the terms of a trust arrangement. See, people don't understand that when you buy a home, what do you get? Do you get a deed, or do you get a deed of trust document?
Oh. Don't we get a deed?
No.
Don't we get a deed?
No.
I'm looking at a piece of paper here. It says deed.
Deed of trust. Now, remember, I'm speaking from the perspective of Texas law. So I have to reference what I state based on our understanding and research into Texas law. Now, under Texas stat, and it's similar in most states, of course, there are some flicking and blending going on where the states aren't all exactly the same. But in the case of Washington, their state Supreme Court has absolutely corroborated what the Texas statutes say in terms of what must happen for you, the homeowner, to legally own that home. Well, in the state of Texas, you get what is called a deed of trust, as so printed on the face of the document. Now, the reason it says deed of trust is because under Texas law, when you, the homeowner, buy a home from who you think is the lender, that's a big part of why when you think everything's okay, it may not be. We'll get into that. Under state statute, a trust relationship by law is automatically established. That trust has two trustees to it. One is the real lender, supposedly, and the other is you. Each of you have obligations under that trust agreement. The responsibility of the lender trustee is that they're going to hold the deed and clear, perfectible, unbroken chain of title to that property for your benefit, such that at the end of the term, if you hold up your end of the bargain, which is to make the principal and interest mortgage payments, pay your property taxes, and maintain the house such that in the event you had an emergency and the bank had to regain ownership through foreclosure or any of a number of other processes, that their value supposedly, if they really put real money under the terms of a true sale into your property to loan you real money, not a paper transaction that's fraudulent, as is the case in most of these instances, but they did a real deal. When they get the property back, it's your obligation to have that property in such a condition that they can come in and clean up a little bit and resell it to protect their value in the property. But if either party does not fulfill their stipulated and legally compliant obligations, you've broken your terms under the trust, and the process is a nullity. So if the lender that you think you're dealing with has done things behind your back, whether it's 2 years ago or 15 years ago, the MERS process started in 1972, for Lord's sake. So this has been in the works for a long time. Now, if you cannot go to the statutes that govern your property rights and ownership in the state in which you reside, and if you cannot have produced from the county recorder's office in the county in which you reside every single assignment, transfer document, your chain of title is destroyed. And that means that the mortgage, as it's termed in some states, deed of trust in other states, it's effectively the same document, just using different definitional terminology, is separated from the financial guarantee document that undergirds it. That's called the promissory note. That under the Supreme Court case, as well as numerous other cases that have happened since that ruling, it's called Carpenter v. Longan, Longan, says that if the promissory note is legally separated from the mortgage/deed of trust, both are nullities, which means it goes back to the individual at the date of closing who is the mortgagor, which was you. Because you as the homeowner agree to give to the lender in return for them loaning you the money and giving you a deed of trust. You agree to give them the rights, if we're playing square ball, to become the mortgagee. So if you cannot follow the checklist that has been provided for your listeners for free, everything on that site's free. There's no charge to it. If you can't follow that 28-plus step checklist, and if you cannot trace A to B, B to C, and in a similar fashion all the way to Z, your chain of title has been irrevocably and legally destroyed, and you are an involuntarily indentured servant, because once those two are legally separated, they cannot be put back together without a court action.
It's pretty frightening, folks, and I would urge everyone to, if you have your mortgage documents, whatever you signed at the bank, in your home safe or drawer or whatever, to get them out and to follow the step-by-step process that is accessible via the website, saveourfamilyandhome.com, of course, after the program. So what we're talking about here, Greg, if I'm hearing you correctly, is an intentional, orchestrated, planned, dare I say, collapse or planned tactic to make one believe they're actually purchasing a home, when in fact the whole process is a fraud, and in fact you're, at the end of the day, you could not only be homeless, but not just homeless, but out everything you've worked for, your blood, your sweat equity, and everything, because of the way this was set up.
That's absolutely correct. It is not speculation. It's what 6 years since 2008, the crisis when Hank Paulson threatened the Congress that if you don't give us what we're asking for, martial law is soon to follow. Do you remember that statement he made?
Yes, and I'm curious, as I went through your website, and folks, I spent a lot of time on Greg's website and the documents that are attached there. Greg, explain to the listeners and to me, what was the context at that very moment in 2008? I mean, we were at the brink, supposedly. What role did what you're referring to play in that process, or in that particular statement?
Give it to me a different direction. I'm not sure I follow you, Doug.
Well, all right. In 2008, that fall period in 2008, when Paulson came out and said, We're 24 hours away from martial law. I mean, the entire financial system is going to implode if banks aren't bailed out and so on and so forth. How is this? How is what we're talking about, or how does that relate to what we're talking about?
Got it. Remember what these banks do. Now, I'm going to tell you my opinion. If I can't prove something evidentially to the best of my ability without making a human oversight or error, I will tell you I'm going to give you my opinion if I can't prove it. If I can prove it, I'll tell you this is evidence fact. Now, if I make a mistake, I'm a human being, but I'll do the best I can to say that at every juncture. Now, in most cases, since we've never been able in any significantly meaningful way since the days of Jekyll Island to be able to audit the Federal Reserve, we as individuals can speculate, but we can't know for sure by the documents themselves the degree of manipulation, corruption, and carnage that has been levied against the average American homeowner. Now, we know what the folks in Iceland did. They just said, we're done. You can't get all of us. We're going to write this stuff off and start over again. What was the reason for their nationwide position on that? It's because they bought and publicly stated that the single one most impactful thing that took place was that they bought in to the Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and all the rest of them sales pitch that buying these residential mortgage-backed securities from America was a great way for them to buy a coupon rate representing income to them for things like the basic securities, the homes, the property rights of the individual homeowner, and their pension funds, and many other things. So when that country bought into this scam and they invested all their money into it, and they found out that they had bought eggs that were nothing but empty shells, and then they calculated what the casino gambled value of the false derivative debt was in terms of financial magnitude. It's like Dr. Paul Craig Roberts has been preaching to all of us if we'll just read and listen. In my mind, the man's a genius. He understands, because of his experience, age, and his patriotic commitment to truth. He's told us that we have, in this country, not only have we taken steps to kill our own economy intentionally, we have spread that disease planetary-wide. Greece, same thing. So what has happened here is that what we see going on today is not an open, honest, fair, normal, capitalistically driven, up and down sine wave in the marketplace. Corruption is at the root of this evil. And what I would like to do would be to proffer a little different opinion that I don't hear anyone else saying. I'm not saying there's not someone else out there, but I know that talking to mutual friends of you and Joe and myself, there is now an agreement based in the evidence that what I'm getting ready to say is predominantly true. And that is, this is the tipping point. It's not other events, Fast and Furious, Benghazi, up and down in the stock market, because we all know, if you don't know anything about it except LIBOR, you know that the stock market is not an open, honest, fairly operated, unmanipulated financial circus. We know that. There are people with huge insights and desires to manipulate with the money and the access to the money through the Federal Reserve, being a private organization that is not auditable, to affect whatever they want to do, and we as the American citizen end up being the victims of their corruption and their fraudulent behavior. But they don't care about us, don't you see? We are not an issue to them. I'll give you an example. One of the things that my truly God-blessed gifts to this process have been the researchers behind this process. They're men of God, true men of God. They're truly spiritual. And they have insights into how to find this information that if other people had found it, I'm literally just an East Texas country boy fighter pilot. And all I can tell you is, if someone else had found this information 3 years ago, I think we would have heard about it. To my knowledge, with all of our daily research, this has not come forth until people like you and Joe have been willing to step forward and get this word out. So that tells me other people either haven't found it, or the only other option is what? They know about it because they're on the inside, but you're not going to get Don Corleone to tell you where he's running the numbers and where he's putting the money he's stealing from you.
Exactly. Complicity. Correct.
And there's also an element of fear of people who have come across this, as we see certain movements, when brought to the light, are marginalized and stamped out, at the first sight of publicity.
Of course, Joe, you're spot on. And, of course, that's what they're trying to do with me. And I have nothing to lose, because if we don't, I had a very comfortable life before this process started. Never had to work another day in my life. And I'll tell you what, and this is not talking about me. I want your audience to know that when I say, personally, I can't speak for you or Joe or anybody else, but for me, when you call me and tell me your story, nothing frustrates me more than to have, when you're in trouble and you're hurting, to have someone who has never experienced what you're experiencing to come up and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I know just how you feel." That, to me, is intellectually dishonest. You can say, however, "I'm sorry that you're feeling the pain, and I love you, but I can't feel your pain because I've never been there." That statement, to me, is extremely intellectually honest. When I say I feel your pain, you can take it to the bank. I feel your pain. Because I've caught lawyers and judges and courts and procedures lying and swearing to it and being so arrogant about it that they will admit in writing that they submitted fraudulent documents to the court, and they put it on the docket. Now, all of that information I'm making publicly available to everybody for free, and there's a reason. My assessment, my judgment, right, wrong, or in between, is that this is and should be, and if we do not make it, what I'm getting ready to say, in my opinion, we individually, our families, our neighbors, and our friends deserve exactly what we get. If we don't mobilize, come together, rise up, and have the single most momentous event since 1776, with just a couple of modifications, but they're wonderful modifications. One, we have to be nonviolent. Anyone who has never been in a violent/combat environment, in my opinion, doesn't know what they're talking about, and they cannot even begin to understand the carnage that someone losing self-control and taking a bad action violently will cause. We cannot go there. It's not an option. Number two, we have to do this legally. because we have to be intellectually honest one with the other. We are supposed to have, as Thomas Jefferson, I believe it was, spoke to the nice little old lady as he walked down the steps of Constitution Hall when she said, "Mr. Jefferson, what kind of government have you given us?" He paused and he responded, "Ma'am, we have given you a constitutional republic if you can keep it." Now, I don't know how thinking about that statement affects you guys or your listening audience, but it gives me goosebumps. I literally got goosebumps when I said that, because this is the tipping point from which the corruption generates things like, because of my military background, I can address it a little bit, Benghazi, Fast and Furious, NDAA, Patriot Act, Agenda 21, PNAC, Project for New American Century. Those are resultant outcomes of corruption. How can those things be done? They're done simultaneously, in my opinion. I try to boil things, Doug and Joe, down to their most simplistic points. You can go into infinitely specific detail on every one and get so boggled in talking about geopolitics and we want to get more oil, so we're going to go attack Pago. You can do all of that manipulation if it is gratifying to you. For me, I think those types of discussions are indicators only. They don't address the real problem.
And Mr. Morse, do you think we still live in a republic?
No. No, we do not.
And is there a point in time where that shifted? Or...
Yes, it was over about the last 100 years.
Okay.
Now, that started well before that, in my opinion, because I'm not any more than you or Doug, Joe, or not in the minds of the participants that have come up with these amazing frauds and concepts for controlling the masses. So what we have to do is to take, in my opinion, what they have written and made public. We have to sacrifice Dancing with the Stars, football games, going to the lake, which is my passion, the water. You have to give it up for a while and use your time to study and do your dead level best to become informed, and then lay out the simplistic macro data points which says what they're telling us in writing is not speculation, because what they're telling us in writing 3 years later happens. Wow. But you see, people don't, Doug, what were you telling me the other day about the normal half-life of a news story in the mainstream press?
Yeah.
We talk about some big thing on Monday morning, and by average Friday or the next Monday, you don't even think about it. That is a designed psychological effect or process that's implemented to do what? It's to get everybody always going every which way like a bomb burst so that nobody focuses on what's really going on. Well, what's really going on here is that if you think about it for a minute, all of these lenders, and our list, which we give everybody, is 50. It was about a 2009 document before MERS took it off their website. They didn't know we got it. We got it totally legally, but they used a process that we have termed search-related encryption. My lead researcher, who's a dear friend of mine, trust him with my life, he was one of the original guys that helped to conceive and put together companies like Microsoft until he realized what they were doing. He told them to go to the hot place, and he left as soon as he found out what their motivations were. But he knows that when you go to a website and you see all this is not off the point, this is something your listening audience, I really honestly with my heart believe they need to understand. When you go to a website and you want to negotiate that, you're looking for a printed icon, yes?
Correct.
Okay. Would you go to a website that has a graphic on it that is a tree? Would it ever cross your mind, this is exactly what it was? This is exactly what it was. Would you ever think that you could go to a website that has a graphic of a tree somewhere on the home page? Would you have any thought that if you started clicking on all the individual leaves on that tree, that you would at some point get to a leaf that when you clicked it, it opened up a whole new website?
Are you speaking metaphorically or
I'm speaking actually. Fact. That's how we found this stuff.
It's incredible.
There was more than one hidden websites which were supposed to be private, the icons of access to which were hidden in graphics that no one would ever think about. We found that in the there's, 14 or 15, I guess, something on that order of different manuals that every MERS member swore allegiance to follow. Now, what is MERS? Well, it's an acronym for Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems. Now, that company was conceived, funded, built, is still owned and operated by the main players in the banking industry.
Can we name them?
Certainly. There's 27 or 8 of them. You go to the website and read them off. Mortgage Bankers Association, J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. It'll blow your mind when you see the whole list.
So these are the who. In the who, what, when, where, why, and how, in the fraud, in the larger scale of things, you've just identified the alleged, I'll use that word for legal protection, the alleged perpetrators of the greatest fraud perpetuated on the American public.
Think about it. You have a group of the largest, most powerful, most influential financial organizations who, through the elimination, the overturning of the Glass-Steagall Act, which was the most powerful legal constraining document to keep banks from gambling with your money, when they were taken out from under the legal constraints of that Glass-Steagall Act, they were able to build this company called MERS, which its own CEO, president in one, R.K. Arnold, and the second guy, William Holtman, who is the secretary-treasurer, in their sworn affidavit testimonies and depositions have said that MERS as an organization had no employees. And in the same depositions, they say that MERS controls anywhere from, one guy, the secretary, I believe, he said it was 30 million, and the president said, no, it's 70 million mortgages. That's the predominant majority of all mortgages in this country. Now, I know, Doug and Joe, we're bouncing a little bit, but we're not in a hurry because we're going to have a number of shows where we can get into this, and I don't want to skip over a point because it will leave a question in the minds of the listener. So let's address that for just a second, going back to, Doug, your example of the individual who says, everything's cool, everything's happy, and I did my house 15 years ago. Every one of these 5,200, now I don't know if it was 5,400 at max, but our list is about 5,200 companies long. It represents mortgage bankers, mortgage brokers, title companies, banks. Everybody was given the name or the title of a MERS member. To become a MERS member, these companies, they're not stockholders, they're members of the club. MERS is the club. The members are the members of the country club that have to, number one, pay dues. Number two, they have to pay regular recurring fees. And three, if they do not follow through on their sworn oath that they agree to follow and comply with all of the MERS rules, they can be very punitively penalized financially. So the assumption is, based in fact, that since these companies were able to flip and turn mortgages at light speed, the assumption is reasonable to say that all these companies work very hard to follow the MERS rules, because being a part of MERS, which was the pre-planned administrative arm of this RICO fraud, if we don't follow the rules, what's going to happen? According to their book, we can do one or both things. We can financially be very punitive against you, or we can cancel your membership. So if you're a broker that's running a big residential real estate brokerage house and you're doing all of your deals through MERS, and all of your brokers are screaming to high heaven because they're making a ton of money and they're all thinking they're getting filthy rich, what's going to happen to your P&L and your balance sheet if you goof up, don't follow the rules, and MERS boots you? You're now back to having to follow the real rules, which, if they were followed, this fraud could have never been instigated for practical, legal, time limit, and statutory reasons. So what does that mean? It means that the major companies that were lending you the money, and remember, GMAC as an example, one of the people I'm fighting, in 1 year, in just 1 year, I believe the number's on the order of 165 new mortgage hydra companies that they formed in just that 1 year. Lord knows how many they formed over 10 years. They formed 165, I believe, something very close to that, a very significant number. Doesn't really matter. It could be 125. It's unbelievable. Why does a company form all of these shell companies? It is to add more complexity into their process so you don't know who the heck you're dealing with. And I'll give you a perfect example in a moment as what's going on in the Southern District of New York's bankruptcy case, which proves that point.
Greg, let me stop you right there as we're reached the top of the hour already. We need to take a short break at this point.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of this Friday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with our special guest, Mr. Greg Morse. His website, SaveOurFamilyAndHome.com. There is a treasure trove of information there on what we were talking about tonight, talking about the deception of property ownership, mortgages, the 2008 crisis, and from before and beyond, and what we're looking at here in the future, the real truth of what it means to have a mortgage, to be a debtor, to have a deed or a trust, and I think this is where it's really going to start to get interesting. Mr. Morris, I don't want to jump ahead, but are we going to be talking about the different types of owners or the people who have secured interest in property before a purchase of a house is made by a regular person?
Yes, indirectly, Joe. That's jumping ahead just a little bit, okay, because if we get too far off the chronological path of how this thing happened, I think it's going to make it more difficult for people to understand. I would urge everyone to download my whistleblower document off the website. It's 279 pages long. There's 35 sections embodied in that 279 pages. Now, Section 18 is subdivided into 15 categories, 15 subsections. To preclude going into all of the detail about MERS, which I don't think is appropriate, if you simply go to the website, download that document, go to Section 18, you can read those 15 subsections, and it will give you all of the specific information in great detail that we're just touching the top of. Who's behind MERS? Because here is the point that I want to make so that people can understand, because I'm going to loop back around to what's going on in their mortgages. One, MERS was formed, funded, operated, and controlled, still is to this day, outside of law, although they'll tell you otherwise, and it's controlled by their board of directors of their parent company called MERS Corp. Inc., who are the board members. They are hand-selected puppets that each come from the major stockholders. Here's the shocking point. One of the major stockholders, through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, is the U.S. government. Fannie Mae claims to control or have interest in the majority. And I say the majority non-specifically because every piece of data you get quotes a different number. Your question will be, why don't we know the real number? Valid question. Answer's even more enlightening. It's because the law has been changed prior to the mortgage bubble bursting, which allowed these trust REMICs to operate free and clear of federal income tax, to commit securities fraud, tax fraud, and tax evasion, and at the same time not have to file any reports. It's a private organization. Just now we're making the linkage, you see. It's just like the Federal Reserve. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are what? They're termed GSEs. What's a GSE? It's a government-sponsored enterprise. That's fancy lingo for saying it is an extended arm through some legalities of the federal government. The only problem is they're both in conservatorship. That means bankruptcy. They answer to the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which is a part of the federal government's bureaucratic money system. So when your home is foreclosed on, legally or illegally, who owns your property? It's the federal government. That is called a land grab. Now, the very entities that set up, funded, and operated and controlled MERS still do, they're the very same entities that you either borrow money from directly or from one of their hydras. What is a hydra? A hydra is another organization which pontificates its individuality, but in fact it is a part of the parent. What is termed the RESCAP, RESCAP, short for residential capital, bankruptcy is the largest bankruptcy ever filed in this country. It was comprised of 51 separate lenders, supposedly separate, all of whom filed for the first time ever in history. Go back to my 2010 prediction. They filed on the same day, at the same time, in the same court for the same bankruptcy protection. And if they weren't all owned and controlled directly or indirectly by residential capital, why is it termed the Residential Capital LLC bankruptcy? So what happened, and you go down that list, it's on the website. The initial pleading is on the site, so you can go see whether your lender is a part of this problem or not. What happens is that when you extrapolate that number from 51 to 5,200, what we're basically trying to tell your listening audience, that the odds, and we don't know till we look at your documents, and that's part of this process, which comes later. But if you think that the odds are likely that the entity from whom you think you borrowed the money was a standalone, non-MERS company, that's a risky position to take unless we follow the checklist, evaluate the documents, and make an evidence-based determination whether or not you're the 1 in 20,000 or 1 in 200,000 that actually borrowed money from an entity that was doing it legally. Now, last statement, and I'll pause and let you say what you want to say. Here's the problem. Going back to Doug's example, within the confines of the MERS rules, MERS and their members had and have the ability to take a mortgage which at its point of inception, let's use Doug's example and say it was that family 15 years ago, that when it was done, it was not considered to be a MERS MOM, M-O-M, MERS as original mortgagee mortgage contract. They can, under the MERS system of instigated fraud, without your knowledge, they can take your mortgage and do some things manipulatively and enter it into the MERS system so that your mortgage is now no longer held by the lender if they were legit on the day you borrowed the money from them. They're no longer involved. And if that happened, I have yet, after interviewing over 5,000 homeowning families in the last 6 years, I have yet, including myself, to see one example where the proper statutorily required filings had been made according to law at every instance, and I have yet to find one mortgage that has not been destroyed and the chain of title of which has been exploded.
All right. Then let's, since we're working off the example, here I am, Doug Hagmann, and in my hand, I've got my mortgage statement. It's my last mortgage statement, as a matter of fact. It is the payoff of my mortgage to the First National Bank of the American Dream. I've been paying on this religiously now. In my other hand, I've got the cash or a check to pay that off. I go to the First National Bank of the American Dream, and I go to the counter and I say, "Here you go. I'm done. Praise God. Here's my coupon. It's number 360 out of 360. Here's my money. I own my home. Give me my my satisfaction, my mortgage satisfaction." Are you telling me, Mr. Morse, that I'm going to have trouble?
I'm not a psychic. I can't tell you that because I haven't seen your documents. But I can tell you that if you go to your county recorder's office and you pay to get blue ink certified copies, not unofficial copies, these, as I have, these are the certified copies stamped with a blue stamp and signed in blue ink by the county recorder's office official, which states that these are all the filings that we have that are legal, at least legally filed. That doesn't mean, like in my case, some were legally filed, but they were fraudulent left, right, and center. These are all the filings we have. Now, if we determine that your mortgage has been securitized and trading, and all of the trust agreement requirements to make the additional filings, which, depending upon the trust, averages 3 to 5 additional filings, of which, in my case, there's not one. So my mortgage is what's called a non-qualified mortgage under the trust document, which is written in a combination of under federal law and typically New York state trust law. That's why this risks at bankruptcy, although it affects 2.4 million mortgages and more than 6 million individuals that occupy those 2.4 million mortgages, it's being heard in New York because the trusts that hold those mortgages were done under the laws of the state of New York. And those documents are so excruciatingly specific, averaging about 1,500 to 2,000 pages per trust for the pooling and servicing agreement, which is a rider document to the real biblical controlling document, which is the trust agreement. Those documents, the ones we studied, have been impeccably done by law firms. I mean, they follow the law to a T, and they are excruciatingly painful. To ensure that the mortgages that are put into those trusts, which are controlled, hold on to your seat, those trusts are controlled by the very same entities that are the predominant banking members of what? Mortgage electronic registration systems. There are about 7 different levels of hierarchical control, beginning with the loan originator, which was the entity from whom you think you borrowed the money, going 6 or 7 steps up the ladder to what's termed the trustee of the trust. We have yet to find a document that does not stipulate that the trustee and the master servicer, that's not the person you're paying the money to that people think it is. It's a different entity. It's kind of like the head guy who's in charge, who's the administrative assistant to the boss, who's the trustee. They have the ultimate legal responsibility, it's not optional, to confirm legally through the county recorder's office and in accordance with the legal statutes existing in the state in which the loan was originated, to ensure that it falls into the category of what is called a qualified mortgage. What qualified means is that the chain of title on that house is impeccably and legally unbroken and perfectible, so that the responsibilities of the lender trustee to the mortgage agreement, contract / trust is impeccably unaffected, so that when they put the unaffected, legally perfectible mortgage contract into one of these trusts, of which there are thousands, they then are legal to file a form. They don't have to get basically no approval. It's you fill it out and you get it. You elect what is called a REMIC, tax-exempt status. REMIC is not really the legal entity. It is a tax classification, which people don't explain accurately to the public. It stands for Real Estate Mortgage Investment Conduit. Now, it's got a lot of legalese and ledger domain and all kinds of stuff in it, but here's what it means. It means that that trust is claiming that it has no obligation like you, Doug, you, Joe, you, the listening audience, or me, have no legal obligation to pay any federal income taxes on any of the money we generate. Now, there is and I'm not going to bore people with the details. We're getting this stuff posted as fast as we can. I don't say it if we don't post it, unless we make a mistake. And if somebody will say, hey, you said this and forgot to post it, I'll say, I'm sorry, we'll get it posted. But we're posting all the statutes, highlighted, most of them, so you can go read it quickly and efficiently. There is a thing called the de minimis rule under IRS code, and it relates specifically, Doug and Joe, to REMIC federal income tax exempt status organizations. That's why I don't even know if it's technically appropriate, but I understand the way they operate. So I call them trust REMICs, and I put REMIC in parentheses. Now, most other people say, well, this is a REMIC. It gets people really confused because they think you're talking about Joe's Diner and then Billy Bob's Donut Shop. No, you're not. The legal organization that owns the certificates that are traded and then subsequently become derivatives is called a trust. It's a legal document. It's publicly disclosed at some point, and then it goes into the black. All of this is discussed in my whistleblower document. What happens then is they elect this REMIC status, and this de minimis rule says that if more than 1% of the mortgages in that trust, and there are thousands in these trusts, if more than 1% of those are determined to be non-qualified mortgages, which means that the chains of title have been destroyed and those mortgage contracts are not legally valid under the laws of the state in which that mortgage contract was executed, then the federal income tax exemption is nullified.
That is what you'd call a bait and switch. And talking off air here, I basically told my dad that means you lose. And what they have done is, as you have these interests and governments and entities that also have stock in your property that you think you own, is this the same action where by signing over, when you think you're signing over or receiving your property after the final payment, you are actually discharging the government of its debt and absorbing it yourself?
I'm not sure if technically that's spot on. Let me try to make it real simple. You have to remember, and this is where we all have a tendency as human beings to get myopic in our thought, because you're taught 1 + 1 = 2. So if somebody starts talking to you about an integer and a square root, you get a little confused. Here's the issue. Timing, meaning a 30-year mortgage, as in my case, that's a long time. Now, Doug, let's you and me play Q&A for a minute, okay?
All right.
You have a home. I know you've told me you pay your mortgage payments regularly, correct?
That's correct.
How many times I'm not trying to, if I'm asking a personal question you want to disclose, please tell me, but I gotta have somebody use it as an example.
Sure.
How long have you been paying on that mortgage?
18 years.
How long is the mortgage term?
30.
So you got 12 years to go. In the 18 years that you own the home, how many times have you gone to the county recorder's office? In my case, it was $280 to buy the actual, and it took me a week to get them because they go to and they meticulously make sure they got every page, they stamp them, and they sign them. How many times have you done that in the 18 years that you've been paying on your mortgage?
Including today, 0.
Okay. If a transaction to buy an automobile takes 2 days, 2 days is a pretty short period of time, so there's not likely much they're going to do to subterfuge your car, right?
Correct.
But if you're buying a multi-$100,000 investment, then in many cases with interest and charges is over $1 million, and they've got 30 years to putz with it, you never check on it, you don't know what to do to check on it, and if you were to check on it, you find out that everything they're doing is being kept in the black, and when you ask them, either nicely, personally, or under a legal guise of a document like a qualified written request as an example, or a lawsuit, if they refuse to give you the information that you need to verify what they've done without your knowledge in 18 years, how in the world do you know what they've done?
Well, it's obvious I don't know.
There you go. And the reason it works, the reason the RICO fraud has been perpetuatable is because you're no different than me or anybody else. You've got too many things to do. You don't have the time or the $280 in my example every month, voluntarily or otherwise. You're not going to go down and make it, on every first Monday of every month, I'm going to I'm going to the county recorder's office. You're not going to do that. They know that. They know that you're focused on doing one thing, and that's living, and a part of your monthly living is to pay your mortgage payment. They've got you exactly where they want you. I listen to your and Joe's show religiously. How many times have you had your broad spectrum of wonderful guests discuss with you the impact of psychological, operational characteristics being implemented on a large mass of people? How many times has that subject either been directly or indirectly discussed?
Well, it's a theme. It's really a theme, yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's what this is. So you see, what you think is not what you know. And that's why I decided to file that whistleblower document, put my name and my home address out for the world, and say, somebody's got to do this. I didn't want to do this. I'm a real private guy. I'm just an old Vietnam Air fighter pilot. I didn't want to do this. But I saw people jumping off of buildings, including the father of a state judge that was helping me during the S&L days. He'd never missed a payment, always brushed his teeth. They came in and they called his note on a 10-story office building in the area close to downtown Dallas. He was so embarrassed, and he knew he hadn't done anything wrong. He's just like you. I've got every canceled check. Back then, the bank didn't tell you that, well, we're not going to send you the checks anymore. We're going to give you an electronic facsimile of it. Back then, we still got this big, thick envelope at the end of the month with all of our actual checks, right?
Oh, yeah.
He was so embarrassed, made the front page of the paper. He jumped off and committed suicide. I mean, it broke my heart. He was such a nice man. He was an old-school developer, cash on the barrelhead. His handshake was his bond, and if he didn't do what he said he was going to do, it's because he's dead. Great guy, and he was such a patriot and so old school that the embarrassment caused him to take his own life. Now, we're quickly at coming to that tipping point. I'm not talking about everybody jumping off the building and killing themselves, but that's the point we're at because people think they know what's going on. But unfortunately, I've been in the legal fight for 6 years. The first 3 is research and getting ready. The last 3 has been in the battle every day. And I can tell you from experience, it's not what you think it is. That's why I decided to put this program together, reach out to a lot of good people to get to people like you and Joe, who have committed to help us get this story out for the benefit of the American people. Because the only way we're going to win this fight is to all come together.
All right.
That's it.
Greg, help me a little bit understand this. Just walk me back a little ways, okay? What are we talking about here? We're talking about people who pursue the American dream, buy a house, get a mortgage, pay the mortgage, and in the end, well, during the course or the term of the mortgage, you've got Casino Royale going on in the background with the mortgage to such an extent that you really don't. The mortgage on your home might be in the hands of General Zhao in Shanghai or something. Is that what you're telling me, or?
I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you, Doug. That's what the evidence says. You know who the single largest real estate mortgage investor entity is in this nation?
China.
Thank you. Do you know what the value is of? I'm not quizzing you. I'm asking rhetorical questions for the purpose of getting out the shock value. The Federal Reserve states at the end of 2013, and we're going to be posting that report so you can see it with your own eyes. The value estimated of the residential mortgage industry in this nation is about $13 trillion. Now, as a MERS member, one of the caveat rules is that MERS mortgages, for the most part, significant predominant majority, had to be securitized. That's a very misunderstood term, and we can talk about it in whatever degree you want it, whenever you think it fits in. But they had to be traded by a company on Water Street in downtown New York called Depositor Trust Clearing Corporation, referred to as DTCC. Now, if you go to their website, they themselves tell you that they trade $2 quadrillion in residential mortgages, like I'm guessing it's a little over a year. I mean, it is phenomenal that particular number. I don't want to sink it in people's heads because I have to go back and look at I'm trying to keep 13,000 documents in my head. But the number, what it says is that the entire $13 trillion value is traded at least one time every 12 months.
Okay. Without our knowledge, consent, or otherwise, I mean,
absolutely.
Okay, all right. So, again, I'm trying to keep this. I feel like I've got a very simple mind here. Perhaps I do. Yeah, you go back to the days of Opie and Andy Griffith. You got a bank on the corner. You go, you pay your mortgage, pay it off. Bang, they give you the papers. Everything is fine, or so it seems. What you're saying is, during the course of history, that process has been convoluted, and the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and the timing of this. I mean, when did everything go off the rails? And I know we're going backwards here, but help me out here. Again, I feel somewhat confused.
I think nobody really knows that for sure, and here's why. It's not a cop-out answer. It's a statement of truth. If I have documents, Doug, that I'm not giving you, and you don't have any way, forceful or otherwise, to cause me to give you that information, anything that you do is speculation.
All right.
That's the environment that we're living in. That's not speculation. That is fact.
Okay. As
an example, you can go look at the average trust REMIC that I would dare say 95+% of your listening audience's mortgages are located in. I can't tell you which one, but I can tell you there's thousands of them, and it's likely that the majority of your listeners' mortgages are in one or more trust REMICs.
All right.
If you go look on the SEC website, when you have the name of that trust in your possession, you go to that file, and what you'll find typically is this. You will find that when the trust elected the REMIC federal income tax exemption, they started to make reports. And typically at the end of the first fiscal year, after which they filed their first report, they filed what's called a 15D report, which says, "Dear Mr. IRS, Mr. Federal Government, our ownership demographic has changed. We now have less than, I believe the number is 300 owners in the trust, and therefore we no longer have to make any more reports. See you later. Bye."
All right.
That means, in my case, the trust closed, and by September of 2009, all the way through today, bearing in mind that the DTCC, who's up to their ears in this, because they know what's going on. You know they do. I mean, you personally know from people that you and I know, you know how much information these people have.
Right.
They know exactly, by golly, what they're doing. They're trading the entire United States residential mortgage industry at least once a year. That means what? It means that almost every mortgage in this country is somehow or another being touched, modified, traded at least once a year. And you don't have a clue what's going on.
What's the motive?
It's real simple. It goes back to the old days when people really understood and paid attention to the influence of the city-state. Washington, London, and the Vatican. Understand it's not just the money. See, people will, because of their lack of understanding, they'll say, well, that's not the problem. The problem is they tried to sell us an adjustable rate mortgage, which we didn't read, and we didn't realize in the first 15 months the mortgage payment was going to quadruple. No, that's a resultant outcome of the fraud. That's not the problem. That's why we're having this battery of shows, to try to help people understand the causal difference between the cause, the reason behind, and the resultant outputs or events which they have come to identify as being a problem. Another issue is, well, it's a combination of the adjustable rate mortgage and the fact that the real estate appraiser overvalued my house. No, that is a resultant event. That's not a causal event. Remember, the direct answer to your question is money, power, control, and the decimation of property rights. You see, if I was manipulating your mortgage and you haven't checked it once in 18 years, there's no way, under the laws as they exist today, you could ever find out from me, if I was the DTCC, You could never find out, if you're by yourself, what has happened to your mortgage. And by the time you thought about it, it's another 12 years. You go in to get your deed, pay off your note, have a great mortgage document burning party. By that time, what's happened? There's 30 years of history of trading and obfuscation of your document. God knows how many, seriously, Lord only knows how many entities are claiming simultaneous ownership to your mortgage. In my case, it's 5. There are 5 entities which claim to be separate, all of which are claiming simultaneous ownership of either my deed of trust, my promissory note, or both. It's all in conflict. It's on face. It's evidence. It's irrefutable. So what happens? By the time you wake up and say, oh gosh, next month is my last mortgage payment, the company that you did business with, if my prediction proves to be true, that the bankruptcies continue to take place at an ever-increasing rapid rate, the entity that you're dealing with has long since filed bankruptcy. What does that mean? You can go to our website, look at 2 of the documents that we've got up there so far, document 61 and document 2246 from the Southern District of New York, and I'll just quote for you very quickly, 3 seconds. Authorizing the sale of certain assets free and clear of liens, claims, and encumbrances.
All right.
That means that all of the assets that are owned cumulatively by those 51 lenders are being sold off to Warren Buffett's, in this particular case, Berkshire Hathaway, and to the Indian government-owned company called Hagmann Loan Servicing Incorporated. They're paying $5 billion to buy $400 billion worth of mortgages, and the court, on a judge's signature, is going to preclude you from being able, in the next 12 years, when you go to pay your mortgage, and they say, we can't find it, so we're going to give you a, what? Lost note certificate. It's not legally perfectible. It's a piece of paper that is intended to keep you servile, to think that you're okay. That's not a deed. By the time that happens, you can't go to the buyers, even if you knew who they were, being Berkshire Hathaway or Hagmann Loan Servicing, and get from them the documents that you would need to be able to try to unscramble the mess. Not to mention the fact that, you know, when people buy a home at 35, say, and they pay on it for 30 years, they're 65 years old, they're looking to retire and cut back, and they don't have as much money, or if they do, it's for their retirement, if they've been lucky enough to set some money aside. They don't have the emotion, the drive that they had 30 years prior. And now the company that you think you've been paying, who's going to, in good faith, according to the contract, going to give you a clear deed after your last payment check clears, there's nobody around to be held accountable. You see, that's where the PSYOP, or the psychological operation modus operandi, is being used by this RICO fraud. Not to mention the fact that the United States portion of the value of the worthless derivatives that represent your mortgage is, if not over, is approaching $1 quadrillion. Now, what is that? Why do I say that? Because it's dadgum important. Anybody who runs a business knows, for a balance sheet to be valuable, so you can draw real conclusions, it's got to have 2 parts, right? Top part is short-term liabilities. Bottom half is what? Long-term liabilities, typically. The number that the government keeps telling us that we're in debt, 17, 18, 19, 20 trillion, whatever it is, that's only the top. That's our rent, light bill, insurance bill, mowing the grass. They don't tell us what the bottom is. The bottom is your long-term debt on your house, your properties, your business, your cars, whatever the heck. That number is approaching $2 quadrillion. That is why people like Dr. Roberts and others have said there is no way to finitely determine as a nation how long it would take, but it's all over 3,000 years to pay this stuff off. We don't have enough GDP generation capability, net of all expenses, with all the other frauds going on, to be able to pay this. So here's the point. The motivation is a multitude of things. It's power, it's control, and it's money. You see, when they overvalued your house, it wasn't like most people think, oh, well, we got a, the appraiser, like he did with me, looks at me. And of course, I saw him get indicted and handcuffed on 5 counts of federal mortgage fraud, and that's why I started looking at my mortgage. But you see, the mortgage fraud that happened here was not the appraiser that overvalued your house, which now everybody says, oh, our house is upside down because the market changed. That could not be more inaccurate, in my opinion. The houses were overvalued because the more value that was placed on the homes, the bigger the number or the dollar value of the individual trust remix became. 10 houses at $100,000 is less than 10 houses at $500,000. When they then, the Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and the rest of them, began trading these, they were trading much larger cumulative dollar amounts. If you're going to rob a bank, why go to the risk of doing it to get $100 if you can get 10 million? Now, the resultant events that come from that are absolutely an adjustable rate mortgage was a terrible thing for people to go into. I had one. That's why I refied out into a 30-year. Yes, houses are upside down, but not for the reason you think. It's because by overvaluing the houses, they could trade through the DTCC and some others, but for other reasons, other issues, a much larger number of dollars. So when the bust happened, and Hank Paulson, ex-head of Goldman Sachs and then subsequently the Secretary of the United States Treasury, says if you don't give us what we're asking for, martial law is going to happen effectively in the near future, if not tomorrow. When they got that money, where was the money supposed to go? From our understanding as American people, listening to what the politicians were telling us, where was the money supposed to go?
Well, I could say this. It should have gone to the relief of the people, but it didn't do that, right? I mean, it went to it went to the banks. Now we're talking specifics here. Now we're talking more what I can understand. Okay, continue, please.
Well, I don't want to be long-winded here, but it's not a simple subject. This is not a fun conversation for any of us to be having. This is not being produced and put out there as a Dancing with the Stars type of a situation. I mean, this is crucially important because if you look at the dollar volume of this, in my opinion, is the tipping point action that most people have either not focused on, have not evaluated it similarly with what I have done, and I'm not saying I'm right. I'm telling you, based on the evidence, I believe with all my heart this is what is happening. Looks like a duck, walks like a duck. they have told people that it's going to be a war with this country or that country or Social Security. No, those are all individual acts of fraud that are being used to cover up what they're really doing. This takes down the country because every one of these institutions, Doug and Joe, are up to their ears in their ownership of these false, fraudulent, worthless derivatives. How can I say that? How many months ago was it? I'll give you a hint. It was in the second half of 2013. When which company? J.P. Morgan. What did they do with their derivatives account? Do you remember?
With their derivatives?
Yeah.
They dumped them, right?
91 trillion. What are we told the debt to the country is? 17 to 20 trillion, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. J.P. Morgan, as one entity, assigned its entire derivatives account, valued at almost $91 trillion, back to the Fed. That's a real interesting, and they didn't get paid for it. They assigned it. They bequeathed ownership of that huge sum of money, which, if we don't want to argue about a few percentage points, it's roughly 4 times what they're telling us the entirety of the debt is to the U.S. government, to the people of America. 20 times 4 is 80, so it's a little more than that. And they didn't get compensated for it. Why do you think J.P. Morgan, being one entity, if they have 90 trillion and you add up all the other banks, how big you think the number will get? You see how quickly it approaches a quadrillion?
Amazing.
This is real simple third-grade addition, gentlemen. But you see, when people start discussing psychology and the way the market works and all these things that most people don't even know about, much less can identify with, I'm one of them, let's get the complexity out of it, and let's just use old Kentucky windage in looking at this. This is not hard to understand. Our country has a despicable history of being lied to and conducting things that were certainly not ethical or at a point of being on the moral high ground. And what happens? We get lied to about it. Gulf of Tonkin, Operation Northwoods, MK Ultra, you can go on forever. And I'm personally very familiar with those particular events, except for Operation Northwoods. So we have a history of being a very gullible society because we listen to the press and we go, there's no way, we conclude, because of our upbringing, etc., there's no way these kind of bad, evil things would be taking place. And what I suggest to you is that if you learn and become educated about the mortgage bubble or crisis alone, it, by definition, if you have the courage to look at the evidence and then not lie to yourself, that misassumption that we would never do anything like this would instantaneously vaporize from the minds of Americans. Here's the key to me. I believe in the goodness of the American population when they are told the truth. Nobody expects anybody to be 100% accurate. It's not possible. We're human beings of God, and we're going to make mistakes. But when the real truth is put out there, I believe the American people will come together, and they will stand up, and they will say, I do not want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution, and I want my property rights back. I don't want you to be stealing from my family and my heirs, and they will come together, and we then can mobilize. We have very specific plans to be able to do this if we all come together. Because if we don't, I don't believe any one or any small group of us can fight this.
I agree with you there, Mr. Morrison. And with that, we're at the top of the hour break.
To kind of walk us through this minefield. But the core here, folks, the core is the fact that we are being robbed, plundered, raped, pillaged, okay, not raped, but pillaged. Our wealth, our birthright, our heritage is being stolen, taken from us by design. The mortgage crisis is not really a mortgage crisis, but a manufactured mortgage pillage orchestration. That's what he's trying to tell you. If you have property, you really might not have clear deed and title to that property. The fact is, we don't know, but we do know one thing. We do remember 2008 when Paulson got up there and said, you know, if you don't do X, then, or if you don't do this, then you're going to have troops in the streets. The economy is going to collapse. We got these mortgages being bundled, rebundled, sold, resold, twisted, turned, colored. I mean, torn up, pasted back together, sold for. I mean, my goodness, it's a multi-armed octopus here that we're dealing with. But until the bottom of the hour, we got Greg Morris, and then because of the nature of the subject, I had asked our intelligence society to come on and to recap, kind of tie some things together for tonight's broadcast, because he is a part of this group of, well, he's part of our conversation, shall we say. So that's the way it's going to take place. Greg, welcome back. Man, I like to say it's great to have you back. Well, it really is. However, the information is intense, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead and continue with, however, where do we go next here, or how do we continue?
Well, because of the time, I think, because I've got to take care of some problems with my mom, let me explain, and I appreciate you letting me leave early. I don't mean to jump ship on you, but we'll make it up in weeks to come. Here's what I think we as a group of Americans need to consider. If you look at the facts, and I'm going to make 3 or 4 points, but I'm going to do it real quick so we don't run out of time. If you look at the legal history of litigation actions taken by individuals since 2008, what you will find, yes, there are always unique exceptions. But if you accumulate those exceptions, which were positive in the favor of the homeowner, it is an absolutely almost unquantifiably insignificant statistical metric. That means that everybody, for the most part, over 97% at least, probably higher, is getting thrown under the bus by the courts for the specific purpose, as in my case, of not allowing the evidence to be brought to light for the American public by putting it legally on the public record. And they have more excuses on why they do those dismissals as there are grains of sand on Waikiki Beach. I think there is an absolute solution for us if we will just slow down, stop complaining, stop fussing, and come together and follow the example of our founding fathers. I don't see any other solution. What do corrupt people in authority fear the most?
The people. Informed public.
Yes. What percentage of the American population during 1776 actually engaged in whatever way they engaged?
Depending on who you ask, 3 to 5%.
Exactly. I was going to say 3 to 6%. We're on the same page. It doesn't matter whether it's 3, 4, 5, or 6. The number is so small, it took a very small number of people to make this social experiment known as the United States Constitutional Republic real. I am suggesting to you that the people today, if awakened and educated and informed and mobilized, are every bit the courageous Christian people that existed back in those days. I don't think there's a bit of difference, but we've got to shed the burdens that have been placed on us by all these societal influences. The bad food, the lies, the corruption, the continual overreach of government into every part of your life. If we shed those because we have the moral high ground, what I've done is I have conceived a business model that, in my mind, in my opinion, corroborated by many others, some of your dear friends that I trust implicitly, and I've met them because of you guys, they know the details behind the scenes. And when they admit to me that after we've conversed on this subject for hours, they have admitted to me, one-on-one, that this is the tipping point, and that if we can put together a business model that allows people to engage in a way that does not do the following things. 1, cost them $1 jillion. How about the price of 2 or 3 movie tickets? Totally up to them, whatever they want to do. Number 2, they don't have to go to court by themselves. What do I mean by that? I mean they don't have to have happen to their lives what's happened to mine. Number 3, they don't have to take on the stress because they're not doing it by themselves. They're now involved with millions of people. If we can bring together these people by giving them for free all of the evidence, all 13,000 pages, which they're going to get from me. For those that are already in a battle, as you and I believe, talked on the phone, Doug, if you were to go to a law firm and ask them to go research and find the information that I have, yeah, you laugh the first time just like you're doing now because it's the only appropriate reaction. Number 1, it's going to cost you $250 an hour average. 2, they don't have a research staff. 3, if they did, they don't know how to research. And 4, all they can research is basically what's on their hard drives that they get from Black's Law and other places. They can research cases, but they can't research the evidence that allows you en masse to change the direction of our country. We all know about what Mr. Bundy and his people are confronting right now. That is a huge issue, but in terms of acreage extent, it's very small. What we're talking about here is exactly the same thing, only it's millions of acres. It's taking away, it's sapping the strength that the American people own and possess in their own little incremental pro rata share because we each own a home and it sits on a piece of dirt. They're tearing at the heartstrings and the spinal cord of this country when they try to decimate and take away from us our right to own property. I don't want to get into the property tax issue because we all know what that number 1 means, and number 2, we know when it started, and we know we got to attack that. But this is an elephant, and we can't eat it in one bite. But if we bring millions of people together and each person has a fork and a knife, I bet that elephant's going to disappear pretty quick, don't you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is I am proposing, and this website is the only way I know, because as you well know, I'm not an electronic IT kind of a guy, but the only way that I know to form, and God knows anybody who wants to help, we'd love to have it because we're limited. I've been funding this whole thing for 6 years, and I don't have the money to do everything that needs to be done, but I think I've got at least a pretty clear country boy idea of how we can come together. We have to have a website which is a common point of collection of input and evidence collection. That's what we got to have. Well, people need to have the evidence that I've got so that they can understand what we're doing. If they're already in a lawsuit, they need this evidence because their law firms, I promise you, have not come up with this evidence. And even if they had the money to give the law firm likely could not come up with it. So what we're doing is we're working around the clock to get all this evidence on the website so that everybody has it. Maybe they're in a lawsuit. Maybe it can help them now. Maybe they're involved in a problem. They're feeling stressed. The lawyer's feeling stressed. If you can find, a really good guy, and he says, we need evidence, but I don't know where to find it. Well, you get it here for free, and you take it, you give it to your guy. Now, all of our evidence is not going to apply, like, say, on a specific mortgage document by contract number, but it'll show him where to go to get the specific information for you, the client. Okay? So we got to put all this out there. If everybody comes together and throws in a couple of movie tickets worth of money, here's what it gives us. It gives us the ability to get the most important thing. And what is that? And then I'm done, and we're running out of time. But this is the key I want to make to everybody. Next week we'll get into a lot more of the more specific details, because this is really setting the stage for what we're going to be talking about. I think, I hope, I pray this is right. Never been done before. Efforts of this type many times they don't have a track record of being done, so we're kind of feeling our way along. But the American people are really smart, and there's a lot of great skills and intellects out there, but they can't communicate with everyone else because they don't even know they exist. Don't have a phone number, an email, or a website they can go to. So here's what happens. Everybody kicks in a couple of bucks, a couple of movie tickets, or whatever they want, $2, $5, $50, $30, I don't care. But if everybody takes it upon themselves to do that, use me as a metric. They can go to the website, go down to the bottom of the page. On the Documents for Download section, you will see a document entitled Summary of Claims. Now, if you will download two documents, that's the first one, and the second one is the amended complaint that was filed in the summer of 2012. Why do I say that? The summary of claims is laid out in columnar form, and it's tied by page, by claim, to that amended complaint, as is referenced by the paragraph number in the complaint, the federal complaint that I put together and filed. In my one mortgage, I have identified and have tried to submit to the court many times over 900 individual provable evidential acts of laws that were broken and or fraud that exists in my mortgage. 900. Now, let's just assume if you use that as a metric, and that's the kind of evidence when you know where to go and what to do, since I had a MERS mortgage, and most everybody else, if they'll go to the checklist, they'll be able to determine in 5 minutes or less the degree to which their mortgage has been controlled or destroyed by MERS. Let's assume that every individual that commits to get involved has a MERS mortgage. Would you assume that I'm at least generically realistic to say that we'll probably find at least 20 pieces of evidence instead of 900 that prove that laws were broken or fraud exists? Does that seem to you, just from your gut, as a reasonable number to use as a basis for mathematical calculation?
Not just from my gut, but from research subsequent to our conversation yesterday. Yes, that's correct. Okay.
Let's assume that you have 5 million people, because I had to use some metric to be able to do the math. The average document is about 10 pages long. Some are 1, some are 500. The average is about 15 to 20 pages long. Some on the lower end would be 10, but let's just use that range of 10 to 20 pages. 20 documents per person. You multiply the 20 times the 20 times 5 million. If you then divide that by 500 pieces of paper per ream of paper, and you calculate the height of a normal 20-pound paper ream of paper that you get from Office Depot, it fills up more than 27 44-foot-long 18-wheel van trailers. Now, I have enough confidence in the American people that my thought of it is, and there's a lot of really smart people, many of whom I was introduced by you, directly or indirectly, who have a lot of ideas on a lot of different ways. I've got my own ideas, but more brains are better than fewer. Can you imagine what would happen, Doug and Joe, if there were multiple national events, the first event of which would be when the gates to the stadium open, 27 18-wheel trucks drive in and say, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, that's how much evidence we have. That proves corruption and fraud. Now, something tells me that if the American people, and that's only 5 million, we've got 70 million mortgages, so I'm talking about capturing the same 4% as existed back in 1776. Are you telling me, is someone going to try to convince me that of all the 300-plus million people in this country, of which over 210 million are at 2.7 per household, are directly affected by this mortgage crisis, that we can't get 4% of those people to buy 2 movie tickets, get everything else for free, and say we're going to find under the tutelage that we'll provide on the website and all the other communicative systems that we're setting up, that we can't come up with a mass of evidence as to illegal fraud and laws that are broken. I have to believe that when we get that number of people clamoring and we say we're not speculating, this is evidence, and we break those people down by metric, state, county, lender, time period during which the mortgage closed, et cetera, and so on, and it's all on the database that we're building, I can't believe that we cannot deflect the primary impact of this momentum of this tipping point that's coming.
I believe that Nancy Pelosi might need to get a bigger office when the delivery is made to her, or John Bonnier, or whoever this delivery is made to. Yes.
I'm not trying to be over dramatic. What I'm trying to say is, ladies and gentlemen, this comes down to us as a society. My plea is, quit depending on an elected official or some other authority to feel heartfelt motivated to take care of you. I don't believe it's going to happen. The only people who are going to take care of us is us.
Amen, brother. Greg Morse, I'll tell you what, very articulate, very well said, outlining, giving an outline of the problem with, I don't want to misidentify this or misdescribe it, mischaracterize it, but you're talking about the mortgage morass that it currently exists and the blowback that this will create for everyone. And the fact is, and correct me, Greg, if I'm not correct here, the plundering, the taking of our hard-earned property, physical property, homes, shelters, away from us by fraud, and giving it into the hands of government and foreign interests. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
All right, sir. Look, I know you've been very generous with your time. I do know that you've got some personal issues to take care of, which we will pray for you and your family. Folks, please, your prayers for Mr. Morris as he deals with some very serious and some very intense issues, family issues. Please, your prayers are much needed for Mr. Morris. And Mr. Morris, you'll be back again next week, Friday, to give us an update, continuation about this, and getting into some very specific information, names, places, other things, of course, that we need to know about. Mr. Morris, God bless you, my friend. Until next time.
Thank you so much for your gracious offer to come on, your time. I want to thank all your listening audience. God bless them all, each one, for their time. This is not a fun subject, but this is all about solutions, folks. And there's a lot of brains out there, and if we can pull together, like we haven't seen in this country since 1776, we can have a dramatic positive effect on this. Nobody's going to solve this whole problem, but I pray that everyone will take this to heart and put aside the seriousness of it, because I don't know how else to verbalize this kind of terrible story and make it sound like I'm in a comedic show. So what I'm suggesting is that if we all come together, pray together, work together, we can do this for darn near no money, a little bit of effort from each of us, but if we put that together, it will be a power that cannot be dealt with. And as we go forward in the weeks to come, so this is all about solutions, but I can't tell you why I personally think this is the solution if I don't tell you what the problem is. So I got to get through the stinky part to get to the good part. So the predominant focus here is a solution that we can all afford, that both in terms of time, effort, and money, and you can take ownership of this. You would be a part of this process as much as you, Doug, or Joe, or me. We're Americans. We're no different one from the other. But if we come together, we can make it happen. And I'd like to thank you and Joe for your time. I'd like to thank John B. Wells, all of his crew. I'd like to thank Marinka Peshman for being so courageous to cover this in the press. All of the wonderful people that are close friends with you, Doug, who have been so gracious to talk to me and get involved and help. We're already seeing a tremendous amassing of brain power and patriotism and courage, and that gives me the power to continue. God bless all of you.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, folks, saveourfamilyandhome.com. Saveourfamilyandhome.com. Bookmark this. Tell your friends. You know what, folks? You're going to have to listen to this again. Listen to tonight again. It's going to be very important to do that. Now, we do have with us to put together, to connect some dots from the Arctic, I believe, by the sounds of it. Our intelligence insider, W. W, are you there?
Of course I am, yes. And for me right now, it's almost high noon, by the way. So there's a certain appropriateness in my mind to that type of day and this type of a subject. You know, Greg and you both talk about this as being almost a tipping point. I would go a little bit further. It's not almost. We are on the precipice. We are right at the tipping point. You can pick 50 subjects, 100 subjects, and every one of them is just so, you know, America shattering. You think about it and you go, well, that one item, this one other item, it could be the end of it. But yet we turn and we look at these things and we say, you know, this one here is the golden bullet. that could take us out. That's the problem, because it's so all-encompassing. And like a magic act, the magician has all sorts of foils and ruses. He has the pretty girl. He's got different things that distract us and keep our attention, while the real magic, the illusion, is being put together. And you think he's just going to one side of the stage to show you something, or the other side of the stage because that's where the pretty girl is. And the reality is he's weaving this web of things all simultaneous with the rest of his actions, so all of a sudden it looks like it just happened. This magic act of getting a hold of the core things that make America America, so that they can get this death grip, this chokehold on us, that's what they're really doing. And you know, at the end of the day, I can guarantee you, as sure as we're sitting here, if they were allowed, these banksters, these thieves, if they were allowed to continue this through to the end that they've already got in planned, in their design, what would happen is some elected officials who they helped get into office would suddenly at the end of this come forward with a solution to this serious problem, just like they did in 2008. And the solution would be some government bailout concoction, a more mature version of the MERS, where everything's going to be in some government pool and all the land, and you're going to apply, and they're going to give you rights, and you're going to pay, and it's going to get sorted out. But at the end of the day, what are you actually going to end up in? Russia, China. You can't own your land completely. You already don't if you have to pay property taxes and everything else. But at some level, what you're really going to end up with is the government's going to own it, or more realistically, some entity that is under a foil of government, and you're a serf, you're a slave. Why? Let's go back to one thing that Greg said. Remember when he talked about the $91 trillion that J.P. Morgan handed over to the Fed? Did you hear what he said? Think about that for a second. To the Fed. Oh, well, the federal government got it. Hello? Anybody out there listening? Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express. The Federal Reserve got all of those derivatives. A private cartel got all of those derivatives. Who has all these mortgages? Who's in control of all that paper? What's it denominated in? Dollars? Who's going to own the property all across the country? And oh, by the way, when the banking crisis happened in 2008, what was the thing that the president announced and all those Federal Reserve people announced? They were going to put together an international body of bank people to come up with a solution to the dollar crisis that would be okay to all these international bodies and groups and people, so that they could fix this problem and address it in the future. Well, you know what? And this is really at the core of everything that we're talking about here and have been talking about for many months. What's going to happen here is we're going to see the final phase of the bubble that didn't actually get fixed back in 2008. Whenever you have a bubble, it's going to burst eventually if it's allowed to keep growing and growing. Anything the government is willing to pay for, you're going to get more of. So the government paid all these banks to keep them from going under because of their malpractice, illegal practices, wrong practices, lousy accounting. And what happened? If they paid for it, you're going to get more of it. What do you got? We're coming to that moment when this aneurysm bubble is about to burst the heart right out of America. I had a business partner years ago who, he liked to drink, he liked to smoke, loved to race cars. One of my great, great friends. I loved this guy. And at 44 years old, he had 5-valve heart bypass surgery. He actually was at 39, but at 44, he had one of those things that happened. He had an aneurysm popped up. Bang, he was dead before he knew he was dead. It was instant. There was nothing anybody could do. Bang, gone. In 2008, you could say we had 5-valve heart bypass surgery. Did we change our ways? Did anything get fixed? No, we've been partying on, man. We've been encouraged to party down. Keep it up. The day of reckoning is here. We are on the precipice. This teeter-totter is going to go the other way, and what's about to happen is going to be catastrophic. It will eliminate everything that you think you loved about your country or were raised to think that was great about our country. Because it all evolves out of, builds out of the one thing that made America unique and new and different on planet Earth at that time. The right of property ownership. Every man a sovereign. Every man a king. Master of his own house. In those countries in Europe, the reason people came here is because you couldn't hunt on the king's land. You were a serf. You had to give what you made to the king, and then you got to keep a little bit of it for yourself, and then you still had to pay taxes, and you had a lord and all sorts of other BS. What's being foisted upon us is a scam. It's like looking at a scene from the Godfather movie, and you're going to get justice from some bought and paid for senator who behind the scenes, they've got him by the throat and the short hairs. They're all bought and paid for. They don't get to get there unless somebody's got something on them. They don't get any support. And by the way, Greg is absolutely right, and it is my experience. The good judges are getting fewer and farther between, who, even if they're good guys and think of themselves as pretty good guys, they know how the system is played, and they know they got to stay within a certain whatever, and they got to, kowtow to the rest of the judges that they work with. And, oh, by the way, they're all attorneys. And there's certain standards that everybody's got to kind of agree to. Well, those standards have morphed. And a lot of your audience has heard me refer to my friend, Erwin Schiff, probably will serve life in prison, die in prison. The greatest current political prisoner in America. And what did the judge say during the course of those proceedings while he was standing the law on its head? I will not have the Constitution raised in my court. I am the law in my court. They will twist and turn this 1,000 different ways. They will go in ex parte and talk to the judge and read him the Riot Act. You have got to do this or it's the end of the system. It'll all come down because of you. They'll do whatever it takes to make sure that these cases go through the way they want them to. Why? Because it's the American system or their system. Only one of them is going to survive here. And all that's needed, all that's necessary for them to succeed is everybody to wait for somebody else to fix this. See, our culture has been tuned into this microwave 30-minute TV show, 1-hour TV show, Batman, Superman solution. One really rich guy, one angel investor, he'll just come up with enough money to fix this problem. He'll put some money in, and we'll all be better off for it. Remember what happened on the Butter Gazillion thing? Here she spent all this time. She's got a family. She's got responsibilities. But she put all her time and resources into getting this critical information to establish and prove and build out the information identifying a fraud, a crime, to fool us all into believing something so they could continue on with their lives. And when it came down to needing some cash to get some documents, because they weren't going to give them, they thought they had us all fried up against the wall because they bleed us dry. Every one of your listeners is right there at the edge, I'm sure. They're doing what they can to hold it together, probably laughing about it. But we sent a message, a critical message. They said, it's just one or two or a handful of people are looking at this, and it's not in the public interest. It's just a couple of researchers, and we don't have time to do your research for you. In reality, what they didn't have time for was to give us anything that might help to establish that a crime is occurring, an ongoing crime, to protect crimes. But your listeners came to the rescue, not one, but a whole bunch. And everybody put a little bit towards that. And I remember talking with a pastor friend of mine a while back. And he says, the people, it's hard as concrete. They just, they're stretched so tight. They got so many things going, and they just can't support stuff because they're always getting pulled 50 different ways to help everything. And I've never said, we need to all support this or that or something else. But I'm just telling you, this one thing, this thing here, related to the mortgages, for the 50 or 500 things that are pulling at us to tear us apart as a country, this is the core thing. Because if they own title deed to the land and convey it to their Capones, their mobsters, we won't be able to get clear title deed to our property. America, as you know it, is all about property ownership, land ownership. Everything builds off of that. And if you haven't got that, you haven't got anything else. You can talk about it all, but they own the land you stand on. You have nowhere to go. You can't hide under a bridge. It's their bridge. If you have no place that they don't own and you don't comply, you got to go to their camp because you can't own property. They're trying to make it so you can't even grow food on your property because you might be damaging the environment growing food, and you better have every animal you have tagged so they know whether or not you've got an animal that's going to endanger the whole world with its disease. So they're going to allow every GMO and every bizarre animal that they've got a hybrid of on the planet, but not the one that you've got that was from your grandfather's herd of cattle that you had forever. They're going to legislate you out of existence. There won't be any legal place for you to be. They're going to own the judges and the politicians and the land. And who is the they? I keep saying they. Who's the they? Well, who do you think it is? The banksters. Those families controlling the money. What did Christ do the one time that we hear in Scripture that he actually became visibly and physically angered to the point of physical action? He cold and calculatingly watched them as they did their trade at the doorway to the temple. And while he watched them, what did Christ do? He fashioned together a whip. And after he had grown enraged, seeing what their practices were and how they went about it, developing his case, at high noon, he stood and walked and began to meticulously, precisely pick up and overturn and spill the goods, all of their cash, all their change, all their notes, all of their animals from the money changers' tables. We must go about with precision in an organized, intelligent manner, overturning the money changers' tables, because that, at the end of the day, is the most lethal attack on us as a country. Destroy the right of property ownership, you destroy whatever it was that was at the core, the starting point of the American dream, the American ideal, the American way of life. Because you are not a sovereign anymore. You are a subject on somebody else's property. And they have the right to kick you off of their land. You wonder what basis could the Russians invade America? Invading, they're coming here to protect their property because they bought it free and clear on, when they bought out something off of Wall Street. When the Chinese bought, whatever they're going to buy. They're going to get clear title deed. They're going to show up here with the law on their side, international law on their side. And what are they going to pay for it with? It might pay for it with quatloos. The dollar won't be worth anything. It doesn't matter what they pay for it with, because they're writing the rules. This isn't by Hoyle. This shuffling of the deck, they're calling the card game. Before they can complete this Tholian web of enslavement and completely capture America, we have to break the bonds. We have to break the mold. We have to stop what they're trying to complete. And the only way to do it is to get eyes on the problem. This audience by itself is not enough at this time. Doug talks about seeing this news in 3D. Yeah. We all need to get our 3D glasses And you've seen people take their fingers and point them at their eyes and then point them at the other guy's eyes and then point them back at their eyes and I'm watching you. Okay, I'm going to put the glasses on. I'm watching you. Hey, judge in New York, I'm watching you, okay? We're all watching you. What are you going to do? And after this judge, if he decides to go with this bankruptcy and give everything free and clear, the other judges are going to build off of that and say, well, based on the court finding there, we're following along because the precedent has been set. And it'll be cookie cutter. You'll never get it back. And the weight of the law will be in their favor. You know what? It was done in secret, few people watching, people didn't understand, even the jury didn't understand. They didn't understand what's going on when they put everyone in jail because the judge wouldn't let the law be sold in his court. He was the law. They stood the law in its ear. That's what's going to happen here. And because you didn't know the details, you don't, it's the IRS code is convoluted by design. The bankruptcy is convoluted by design. The high-frequency trading is done by design. All the derivatives, it's by design to make it so complex that no individual, no group of individuals can possibly get to the bottom of it. Those money traders at the doorway to the temple had every law and Talmudic understanding and everything about why it was right for them to be there and judge all of the gifts and the people were bringing for offerings and decide this one's okay, that one's not, but then all of them aren't okay, so you got to have this one because it's been done right, and we're the ones that know because we control the entrance to the temple. These people are making it up as they go. Unless you say no, no, no. Somebody has to pull this together. And that somebody is everybody. Even this audience isn't going to be enough right now. That's why it's going to take several weeks, a lot of weeks, with new people coming, hearing the details, and looking precisely at their own personal situation or their relatives or their bosses. If your boss doesn't own his property, you can't get a loan on it, he's going to have a job for you. If the people that you do caretaking on their property or landscaping or yard work or the farm that you work on, it turns out they don't own it, they're going to have a job for you? Or are they going to put a Chinese guy in there because the company that owns the property now is Chinese? Everybody's got to pay attention here, shoulder up. No one person should have to continue to do the burden without some support. Carry the burden. Just like Butter Design couldn't do it all herself. She already pushed the limit. We came in, we backed her up. We're continuing to pursue to try to get the truth. This is orders and orders and orders of magnitude larger. This is everything. This is the big one. And that's why I'm throwing in on this and saying we've got to pay attention. This is the one. This is for all the marbles. Craig's got the point. He's carrying the ball. He needs backup, and he doesn't need it by 100 listeners. He needs it by 100,000 listeners. So everybody pay attention. And if it doesn't get worked out because not enough people show up, we'll have nobody to blame but ourselves. I don't want one person to show up to fix this problem because then it won't get fixed. They'll just attack that one person. We don't need one angel to show up at church. We need every single listener paying attention, on point, ready to engage. Spend $5 or $10. Help them out on the website to cover the legal bill so we can do the work that everybody else should have been doing a while back, and now it is a crisis, and it is the end of the world, as you know it, if we don't get on top of this. We can hold the tide back. One guy can't. A handful of guys can't. And there's no Superman going to fix this. We all need to show up.
15
we all need to show up. We all need to show up. We all need to show up. All of us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. W, you tied it together well. And you're right. We all need to show up. Folks, that'll do it for us tonight and this week. Boy, what a tremendous program. Thank you, W. God bless you, my friend.
All right.
Thanks, W.
Good night.
All right. Monday, we're going to have a check-in by CIA whistleblower Robert Tosh Plumley. Until then,